Okay, I have the time is 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And we still have some people joining. So they will pop on. I'll admit them as they come in. But we're just going to go ahead and get started so that we can be done by 4 o'clock because I want to respect everyone's time and make sure we finish in a timely manner. So welcome, everyone. For those of you who have not met me yet or don't know me, my name is Nick Harper. I'm the Civic Engagement Director for the League of Women Voters Minnesota. And I've been a staff member with the League for 4.5 years, and I've been a League member for 7, 8. It's either 7.5 or 8 at this point, I think. Whatever 2014 was. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and get this presentation started, and we'll actually start the presentation. Okay. Everyone can see the presentation. Can I get a nod or a thumbs up from someone? Yes, great. Thank you so much, everyone. All right. So if people have questions, go ahead and jump in with a question. I usually ask for questions at the end of every slide or so, but don't feel like you need to wait until the end of the presentation to ask a question. I might on occasion say that's a great question. I'll get to it in a little bit, but I promise I will try to answer everyone's questions. If you are, you're welcome to use the voice to unmute yourself or to use the chat, although I don't always see the chats immediately right away. So feel free to jump in with a question if you have one. So this is our January Jumpstarts for leaders. Anyone can do them, but they're especially important for local league leaders. And this one is our Advocacy 101. We're going to cover just some general basics about league advocacy in general, and then talk in detail about the legislative session coming up. I see there's many people here who have also joined our Lobby Corps and Observer Corps program. Thank you for doing that. Very excited. You all who have joined that program will be getting an invitation either later today or tomorrow morning. So keep an eye out for that. For our our weekly Monday meetings. They're not required, but obviously strongly encouraged because that's where 90% of the activity will be happening on a week-to-week basis. Again, welcome to our January Jumpstarts. We're trying to do more regular programming at the state level and trainings for local league leaders and anyone who might be interested in becoming a local league leader. So we're doing January events called January Jumpstarts. You may have also been to one of our August academies last August. We'll probably do that again this year. And it's just to help orient people, encourage regular networking, answer questions, etc. So one of the big things that I like to remind folks of with the league and our advocacy work is that we are one organization with 3 levels. So we have a national league, a state league, and a local league. And anytime you join a local league, you are automatically part of that state and national league. And each level of league works at a different level of activity. So the national league sets national priorities and lobbies on federal legislation and action with the president and Congress. And anytime that a state or local league wants to lobby a legislator or ask for federal action on a certain issue, we do have to go to the National League to talk to them about that. Unless, of course, they've already issued like an action alert, for an example. So you've probably seen action alerts about the Freedom to Vote, John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act that was voted on in the Senate last week. They had an action alert about that, so everyone was more than welcome to lobby on that. At the state level, same thing, but we do it with the governor and the state legislature. And then local leagues typically work with their county, city, town, school board, any of those local those local government entities. And if you're in a county with more than one league, obviously you're strongly encouraged to be coordinating and collaborating with other leagues in your county, for example. The other big thing that I like to talk with folks about is, if you're new to the league, is how the league takes action on issues, because it's not always clear to folks, because this is very unique to the league. I personally have not encountered any other organization that takes positions in this manner. So with the league, we have what's typically called the program planning process, and it's slightly different for the national and state. I'm talking mostly just about the state level right now. National, as I mentioned earlier, national handles all the national priority setting and national action. So they have their own process. It's very similar, but I'm mostly only talking about the state league process and what's in our bylaws. And then local leagues will also have their own process for adopting positions and taking action, and that may vary vastly from league to league. So at the state league process, we have what's called program planning, and that's where the league either begins a study or has a concurrence. So a study is where we commence exactly what it sounds like, a study of a policy issue to develop a policy position. Concurrence is where there is already a policy position that's been adopted by a study done by another league, another state league usually, and another policy position is already written, and then you adopt that policy position through concurrence. So that's the two pieces: is a study or concurrence through program planning. That's the first step. So the result of a study or concurrence is a policy position. That policy position is then put into what we call our program for action, which is our booklet of all of our policy positions. There's also policy positions adopted by the National League that the State League can act off of or act based on. And so that goes into our program for action with a policy position. And then based on those policy positions, we take action and do our advocacy, typically through Lobby Corps and Observer Corps, because it's often through legislative, but the board might take action independently or sign on to. We have, for example, a sign-on process for sending on to letters that partners want us to be signatories on, that kind of thing. So that's kind of our general process. The reason I mention it is because sometimes folks don't realize that the league doesn't have a position on an issue, and therefore we don't take an action on that because we don't have a position, we don't have a position because we've never done a study or concurrence on the issue. Or, for example, there might be a position, but it has a very specific stance, and we cannot act against or in a different way from that position. So I just like to review that with folks so that people get a general understanding of what that process looks like. Now that program planning process, so how the league adopts a study or a concurrence. In odd years, when we have a state convention, proposals are submitted to the board for a majority vote. If it gets a majority vote from the board, it's considered a board recommended program. And then only a majority of the votes from the delegates at convention are needed to adopt that program study or that concurrence. If it's not recommended, then the proposal requires a 3/5 votes of the delegates. So if you were at convention last year, we went through that process. In even years, like this year, where we have council, the board does not make any recommendations. The program proposal is taken directly to delegates at council, and then it requires a 2/3 vote. And I believe there will be at least one, if not two, I believe concurrences at state council. I don't know the details of those right now, but that further information on those concurrences will come out when more state council information comes out for folks. So I like to explain that to folks, that we have kind of sometimes it's criticized as a lengthy process, and it is in many ways, because you really can only start or adopt a new policy position at a convention or council. But the reason for that is because you're trying to engage the entire membership through a vote. So that's kind of how that process is. And that's written into our bylaws. So there's not really a way around that. We would have to change our bylaws in order to change the study or concurrence process. Any questions so far? I don't see any in the chat. All right. Seeing no questions, I'll go ahead and move on. I am going to leave time for kind of Q&A, anything advocacy related at the end of this. So if you do have a burning question that's not related to the slides, there will be plenty of time for Q&A, I think. So we will have time for that. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the 2022 legislative session, and just kind of give folks a preview of what the legislature looks like, what's going on at the legislature already, and what we expect from session. I first want to start with the leadership of the legislature. Those are the key players that we're always watching. And there's 6. There is the Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman. There is the House Minority Leader, Kurt Daudt. There is also the House Majority Leader, Ryan Winkler. Now, the Speaker of the House is really the main lead for the DFL caucus in the House right now. She is, of course, assisted by the Majority Leader, Ryan Winkler. And then the Republicans are led by Representative Kurt Daudt. In the Senate Majority Leader is Jeremy Miller. You may recall that last year it was Paul Gazelka, but Senator Gazelka resigned that position because he is running for governor. So he's still a senator, he's just not the Senate Majority Leader. So Republicans are led by Jeremy Miller in the Senate. DFL caucus in the Senate is led by Senator Melissa Franzen. And then the Senate President, who is a player, although not as important as the Senate Majority Leader, is also currently Jeremy Miller. But the Republican caucus took a vote, I think in October or September, and they're going to change that to David Osmek. So that just doesn't become official until session actually begins on January 31st. So it will be David Osmek in the near future. I see a question in the chat. Is there a timeline when, so going back to concurrence, is there a timeline in submitting a concurrence to the council as to informing other leaks? Yes. So in our bylaws, concurrence proposals must be submitted to the board to distribute to leagues at least 2 months before council. And so council, I think, is in April this year, if I remember correctly. So it would need to be, any kind of concurrence would need to be submitted to the board sometime in February. I can't remember the exact date of council this year, but in the bylaws, it's specifically, it must be distributed 2 months before council. So that's the timeline for council years. Any questions about legislative leaders? All right. The makeup of the 2 chambers or the 2 houses of the legislature are also quite unique this year. They have grown more unique over time. In the Senate, there are 34 Republicans, 31 DFLers, and 2 independent senators. Now, I will say those 2 independent senators, they do caucus with the Republican caucus. So while they are independent and they will not necessarily always follow what the GOP caucus wants, they are actively collaborating and cooperating with the GOP caucus in the Senate. In the House, there are 69 DFLers in the House, 59 Republicans. There are 4 what are called, they call themselves the New House Republicans. They are not technically part of the Republican caucus. They are their own caucus, just the 4 of them. And they're more of like a Tea Party libertarian type of elected officials. There's one representative who is a Republican, but he is not part of the Republican caucus. He was removed from his own caucus for, I'll just say, behavior. And so he is a Republican on the ballot, for example, but he is not part of the Republican caucus. There is also an independent in the House. He used to be a DFLer until he was removed from his caucus for behavior reasons. And he is not affiliated with the 2 independents in the Senate. They are actually very different types of elected officials. So that's where we're at. You know, we typically think of there being 2 parties, which is typically true, but we do have some small variations in the legislature this year, which could make things interesting and will continue to make things interesting. So yeah. Any questions on the caucuses and the makeup of the 2 chambers of the legislature? Okay. So I'm just going to cover some of our priorities this year. Legislative priorities were set by the board in September, and there's 3: democracy, climate change, and racial justice. So I'm going to start with democracy and just get people caught up on where we're at with democracy things. So obviously we're still in the middle of redistricting. We tried for a full reform bill that included an independent commission and statutory principles set in law, but we weren't successful in getting it past the committee stage, although we did get votes in committee. The House Redistricting Committee actually did introduce, or plans to introduce, a committee bill establishing redistricting principles in the statute, so that will happen on the first day of session, I believe, or soon thereafter. There will not be agreement with the Senate Redistricting Committee, so I don't foresee it really going further than just being a committee bill. It might get a vote on the floor, although I see that being of the full House, but I see that being unlikely. The good news is that the bill does reflect our ideal principles and prioritization, which is nice. So it seems we were heard in the House on what the league wanted to see. There's no bills yet, bill number yet, because it hasn't actually been filed. It hasn't been pre-filed either. And so it's not likely that this legislation will pass off the House floor or the Senate, but it is good progress to see that it was taken seriously by the House committee. Amy has a question about the members of the legislature who were removed from their caucuses. Are they still members on committees? I believe so, yes. I believe both the Republican who's not a Republican caucus member and the former DFLer who is now an independent in the House. I believe they both still have their committee assignments. They were simply removed from their caucus, if I remember correctly. All right. So what that means is the legislative committees, redistricting committees, have been actually drawing maps at this point. The DFL in the House published some proposed plans in late November. The House GOP proposed some plans in December. And then the Senate GOP proposed slightly different plans earlier this month in January. They had the same congressional plan as the House GOP, but they had a different legislative plan. And I don't know whether that plan is different because that Senate GOP disagreed with the House GOP, or if they simply made improvements upon the House GOP plan that the House GOP likes. I don't know. It doesn't matter either way, because the House and Senate redistricting committees are not going to agree on a set of maps, almost certainly. And I have not seen any movement or, I think both sides have said, we'd like to agree. That would be great. We're going to keep working on this. But I haven't seen any actual real movement or negotiations. So I don't think that they will actually agree on plans. If you want to view those plans, I've got a link in this PowerPoint that I can send folks at the end of the presentation if you want to look at those plans. But the legislature is probably not going to agree on any maps. What that means is that there's the special redistricting court panel is likely to draw those maps again, which is why we have participated in the ongoing Watson v. Simon redistricting lawsuit. Oral arguments were on January 4th. And so at this point, we're just waiting on the court to draw maps. The court technically will not publish maps until at least February 15th, because that's how long the legislature has technically to draw maps. So they'll wait until they'll give the legislature until its deadline to pass something. And then if the legislature doesn't, or when it doesn't, they will publish maps on or soon after February 15th. So that's what we're expecting to see in terms of timeline. We'll also, in general, be working on voter empowerment. So we'll be standing by to address issues that support ballot access and fight voter suppression. So examples of that is misinformation about quote unquote election integrity, voter ID, provisional ballots, automatic voter registration. We'll be working on those issues again and watching and monitoring for those issues. Let's see here. So other issues and priorities we're working on. Other priority issues under democracy, we do have one member of Lobby Corps who will be working on civics education specifically. I put that in the democracy priority because that's where it seemed to fit to me, is we want civics education because it is good for democracy and good for voters, because those students turn into voters. And so we put that under the democracy. I put that under the democracy realm. We also plan to work on racial justice, some issues that I know will likely come up. We'll be watching Restore the Vote right now. So restoration of voting rights for individuals who have completed their probation, parole, or supervised release. The Restore the Vote Coalition has kind of been on hiatus during COVID. Right now, there is a lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court of Minnesota as well, challenging the current statutes related to restoration of voting rights. And so mostly we're waiting on that Supreme Court decision to come out, because maybe they'll fix the issue for us and we don't have to do anything. Or we'll see what they say, and then that will inform what kind of action we need to take for Restore the Vote. I see a question from Sally about civics education. Is there a current state statute requirement that requires civics education in Minnesota? Yes and no. There is currently a statutory requirement for, I believe, social studies, but there is not a requirement specifically for civics education. And that's actually part of the concern, because social studies includes history, it includes geography, it includes economics. And while those are all important issues, the amount of social studies that's required is so small that a student will likely graduate only have taken geography and 2 history classes, but not having taken anything related to civics education, anything related to actually how to participate in the current political system. And that's the concern, is that it's great for students to learn history. They absolutely do need that. It's great for students to learn things like economics and geography. Obviously, we need that. But they also need to be prepared to participate in the current political system. Jacqueline or Jackie, I see your question. I'll get to that in just a second. So under racial justice, we also know that public safety will be an issue. There also, the House DFL just made a proposal on their public safety plans. The Senate also plans to release something in the next week or so, is my understanding. And we know that there will be racial justice impact on all those policies because racial justice touches on every kind of policy, but especially public safety. And then we also foresee there being discussion about education in general. Specifically, the Page Amendment has received some attention, which is what Jackie's question is. Jackie wants to know if the league has a position on the Page Amendment. At this point, we currently do not. We do have positions that likely apply, but we have not taken a position on the Page Amendment because we just haven't had any members, part of our lobby corps, interested in it or following it or monitoring it. So I'm hoping that we will have, I know we will have members in the Lobby Corps and Observer Corps who will want to work on it. And that's what we will do as part of the Lobby Corps and Observer Corps, is get information on the legislation. My understanding is that there may be amendments to the currently proposed language. So we'll find out what those proposed changes will be. We will get more research and information about the proposal and any other organizations' concerns. And so we'll do all that information gathering and make that determination in Lobby Corps and Observer Corps. I also see a comment from Kathy, and I appreciate that comment. The position statement that we have in our program for action specifically has a comment about when civics education should be taken in high school, and so that's our position. That's what was adopted by the league, and so that's what we're advocating for. That's not something that I can change. That's only something that delegates at convention or at council can change. So we'll also be working on climate change. There's already a climate change task force that works on climate change issues outside of the legislative process. And so we'll learn more about that. Does the league take a position on the legislature legislating educational requirements? We do have a specific requirement for civics education, and that the legislature should legislate educational requirements for that. We also have some educational requirements on equal opportunity in education. So at least on those issues, we do have a position. I see a question from Gail on what role did the BIPOC caucus play? Gail, could you clarify what you mean? Are you talking about in the legislative process in general, or could you, I'm just not quite sure I understand your question. All right, well, while Gail follows up with that, I will cover some of the other points on this slide. Other important issues to watch and take note of, it is a bonding bill year. So that is the year that the state takes on debt to pay for infrastructure, and you might also hear it be called the capital investment. So that's things like public facilities and public buildings, roads, bridges, water treatment facilities, all kinds of things like that, where the state will take on debt, issue bonds to pay for those, building those facilities. There is in the bonding bill proposed by the House, a good portion of that is, I believe, for community equity is the term that they use. So a lot of racial justice impact there. They also have a good portion of the bonding proposal addressing climate change and climate bonding proposals. So we'll be taking a close look at that through Lobby Corps and Observer Corps. There also is, so the odd years are the years that are typically budget bill years. Those are the years where they have to pass a budget bill in order to keep the government open and prevent a shutdown. In the even years, like this year, they don't have to pass any budget bills, but they almost always do pass some kind of legislative supplemental budget bill. And so they will have proposals on additional spending or changes to spending through those supplemental budget bills. They also will be debating the budget surplus decisions because we do have a fairly decently sized, pretty large budget surplus this year, and there will be proposals on what to do with that. Governor Walz has already issued a proposal that has something, it's like a $7.2 billion surplus, and he's proposed something like 5.1 to go towards what he calls family and children support, I think, or something like that. I don't know the specific details. I haven't been able to look at that proposal closely yet. And then part of that includes a proposal to send Walz checks, or my preferred terminology is Timmy Stimmies, to taxpayers who earn below a certain threshold. It's something with 6 digits for a single payer, or for a single individual, but it's $175 per taxpayer, or what is that, $350 for a married household, and so that's part of that budget surplus proposal from Governor Walz, is to just send checks directly to folks. I suspect we will see we'll see some kind of proposal from Republicans that will almost surely include some kind of tax cut, permanent tax cut that isn't just a one-time check, but a permanent cut, which, depending on your position, is good or bad. Some people feel like it's good because it's a permanent way for taxpayers to save money. On the flip side, other folks don't like tax cuts necessarily because, we had a surplus one year. What if we don't have a surplus next year? And then we have a budget deficit. That might happen if you cut taxes too much. So there will be debate over that, I'm sure. I have a question from Amy, who's authoring the House bonding bill. The chair of the Capital Investment Committee is Representative Fu Lee. And I don't know if it's exactly the governor's bill or if it's different. I suspect it is going to be very, very similar, if not identical, to the governor's proposal. And that's something that I hope to learn through Lobby Corps and Observer Corps through our members, is to send somebody to Representative Lee and ask that question. And then we also will have 5 policy interns this session, which is more than we've had ever before. They're just temporary part-time college or graduate students. And so they will be helping with us doing some research, monitoring the legislative session, etc. Let's see. All right, so other ways to get involved. So if you are our Lobby Corps and Observer Corps, if you are really sure that you want to join Lobby Corps and Observer Corps and you haven't signed up yet, the form is closed because the deadline has passed. But if you are really sure you want to join and you haven't signed up yet, you can send me an email today. And when I say today, I mean like literally within an hour. Otherwise, you will not be signed on. But you can send an email to me and I will get you signed on to Lobby Corps. But otherwise, applications for Lobby Corps is gonna close because we've actually got to start on the actual legislative activity. But other ways you can get involved, if you're not joining Lobby Corps and Observer Corps, is you can do, we will be sending out action alerts. So those are our email alerts that we send out to our members, asking them to call, email, or otherwise contact your legislators to ask them to take action on a piece of legislation. So we will be sending those out, so look out for those. When I send those out, there is a link to our website that you enter your address and it will automatically show you who your legislators are and which legislators I need you to call. And it will also give you talking points so that if you don't know anything about the issue, but you want to advocate on it, and still make that call, you can still do that. And I do encourage people to use that system because it also allows me to see how many people have responded to our action alerts, which helps me know what kind of reach and influence we're having at the legislature. So if you get an action alert, even if you already know your legislator's phone number, I would encourage you to please use our action alert system still, because that lets me know that you used our system, that you responded to our action alert, so I can see how many folks we've got responding. That really helps me understand who we're calling, what legislators have already been spoken to, etc. So please do that whenever you can. We'll also be having our capital letter, which will be a weekly or bi-weekly, hopefully, probably bi-weekly periodic publication during the session, which with updates on bills, any testimony the lobby corps has submitted, any observer corps reports when they've been monitoring legislative hearings. Often we include links to news articles on legislative activity or legislation, that kind of thing. So keep an eye out for that. That used to go out in a PDF format. It is now formatted as a blog post on our website. However, we know that our members often like to print things and read on paper format, and you can print directly from the web page to print it out if you want. So that's still possible, even though the formatting is slightly different. Last year I had a member test it for me, and she said it worked great. So you still will be able to print the capital letter if you want to read it on hard paper instead of just on your screen. Usually during the legislative session, we also have some kind of day at the Capitol. That is suspended again due to COVID concerns. Even if we really wanted to meet in person and meet legislators, most of the buildings where they have their offices are actually closed and off limits to the public this year. The Capitol itself is open for like tours, but the buildings where the legislators have their offices are actually closed to the public, except for certain appointments. So it's not a year where we'll be able to just kind of like pop into our legislator's office this year. We might do something virtual. We haven't figured that out. We're gonna probably talk about that more as staff and get that figured out. But there won't be a physical day of the Capitol this year. Gay asks, will action alerts go out to all leagues or to representatives in leagues? Action alerts go directly to members. So anytime a member signs up to be a member of the league, they automatically are signed up for our action alerts. And so all of our members get action alerts. The only reason they wouldn't get an action alert is if we don't have an accurate email address for them, or if they have actively unsubscribed from emails from us. Otherwise, every member will be getting. Now, there are some action alerts that I only send to specific districts because I only need that particular legislator to act on the issue. So not every action alert will go to every member. But in terms of when I issue an action alert, it will go to members directly. If an action alert is up, I always encourage local leagues, you're more than welcome to share that with the public and to reshare it through your newsletters or emails, etc. Share it on social media. Absolutely, please do. I would love that. But you don't need to be worrying about whether it got to members, because members should all directly get the action alert. I got a question from Jackie about the dates of session. So it begins on the 31st. And then the last day of session is the third Monday after the first Monday after the third Saturday, which is, I don't know, I just always say the third week of May, whatever that date is. I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I can't calculate that right now, but it's late May. They can't take official action on the last day of session. So if they do take any official action, like voting on a bill, it has to be done the Sunday before. Kathy says there are a few legislators that might be doing office hours in the Rotunda area. Great, we'll keep an eye out to see if any legislators are doing that, and we'll keep an eye out for that. Amy did the math for me. Thank you, Amy. She says it's May 23rd. So they have from January 31st until May 22nd to do all of the work that they plan on doing, whether that's passing policy, adjusting, dealing with the budget surplus, supplemental budget, bonding bill, any of that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's a short session, so this year. So it might be crazy. The other thing that I thought I had a slide on, but I guess it's missing now. Yeah, I'm missing a slide. It is also an election year. So we have a lot of, and it's a redistricting year. So what redistricting year means is we often have a lot of legislative retirements, which we've seen very many, people who aren't running again. And if a legislator isn't running again, that means they might act differently than if they were trying to get reelected. Sometimes that means they'll act more in line with their voters or their personal values compared to what the party wants. Maybe sometimes it means they'll act more to what the party wants than what their voters want. I can't make any guarantees either way. What I can say is that a elected official who knows that they're retiring does not always act the same as an elected official who is seeking reelection. So we might have some wild cards. The other half of that is because it's an election year, the elected officials who are running again will be thinking about that very carefully, and they will be watching, and they will be trying to act in such a way that will get them reelected, and fight off any not only any challengers in the general election, but also the primary election. So that will inform the ways that they act as well. So those are not, legislative activities, but those are things that legislators have in their heads in a year like this. Any questions so far? Okay. Generate Jumpstart, thank you for participating. After this presentation, we still have another 20 minutes that we can talk, so if people have questions about anything advocacy related, other than specific legislation that will wait for Lobby Corps and Observer Corps. But if you have questions about the advocacy process in general for League, I'm more than happy to discuss that. Once we're done here with any questions, there will be a survey that comes out probably tomorrow or later this week, just to help us learn how we can improve our January Jumpstart and improve future trainings. Please keep an eye out for that survey. Thanks, Jerry. Glad you found it helpful. So do we have any questions from anyone? What questions do you have for me? Can you tell us how to watch sessions of committee remotely, even if you're not on Observer Corps? Sure. If you, obviously, don't go advocating in on behalf of the League. That's what the Lobby Corps and Observer Corps is for. But as just like a general person who wants to watch a legislative session, I'm happy to show you how you watch a committee hearing. Let me pull up. So this is the state legislative website. Its web address is leg.mn.gov. If you can't remember that, just Google Minnesota legislature or use whatever your, Bing or whatever you use. It'll probably be one of the first links. This is the web page. If you can, there are a couple of different ways to do it. If you just want to see what's happening this week, you can just click the next 7 days on this calendar over on the right, and it will show you all the things that are happening for the next 7 days. So on January 31st, there's going to be a meeting of the Human Services Background Study Eligibility Task Force Subcommittee on Data. That's a mouthful. So they'll be meeting, and then there will be a floor session for both the House and the Senate, and that's where they will officially commence the legislative session. February 1st, for example, Early Childhood Finance and Policy Committee will have a hearing. You can just click that, and this shows you the agenda. If people wanted to testify, not on behalf of the league, on behalf of yourself, Lobby Corps and Observer Corps is where we make those decisions for the league. That all information is here. A permanent calendar link, so if you don't want to go hunting for it, you just want to bookmark this page so that you have it. And then the day before or the day of the hearing, typically they will actually put a link to the video or audio recording in this little green box thing on the calendar. Let's say you have a specific committee you want to watch. So let's go to the House, and let's say you're going to watch the State Government, Finance, and Elections. That's where all the election bills go in the House. You can actually click on that, and then it will show you upcoming meetings, and that's where you can see any upcoming meetings. You click schedule here, and again, there's no meeting set yet because they haven't scheduled anything, but they would pop up there. Let's see, I've got a few more questions in the chat, it looks like. Oh, my email for signing up for Lobby Corps, that's a good question. Thank you. Email's in the chat, nharper@lwvmn.org. Carol, you are signed up for Lobby Corps. You will get an email tomorrow, probably, either later today or tomorrow, inviting you to the Monday meetings. Amy asks, how does the league determine whether a bill fits a position? In the past, that's been up to me as the Civic Engagement Director. I will probably try to consult with our Lobby Corps members and see what they think. It's not as easy as people think sometimes because we have a lot of positions and they're not all named what you think they're named, right? So like we don't have a position on racial justice, but we do have positions on equal opportunity, and we do have positions on housing and criminal sentencing and juvenile justice. And so all of those issues touch racial justice. So you might have to go look in a position that you're not, under a different name. So for example, so what I probably will do is typically, I will try to, and my goal is I try to not say no. Just so we're clear, when people come to Lobby Corps and Observer Corps and want to support something, it is my goal to not say no. I want our members to be able to advocate on positions that they're interested in. I want us to advocate as the league on issues. That's what we want. So I will try my hardest to find a way to not say no to you. That is my promise. The only reason I say no is like if somebody wants to testify in favor of legislation, but they don't want to write testimony, we have to have something written before we can testify. Or if they don't want to bother finding a position to support that legislation, we have to have a position that supports the legislation. So, you got to do the work behind it, but if you do the work behind it, I will try my hardest to say yes to you. And if for some reason somebody disagrees with my position, obviously I report to Michelle, the executive director, and she reports to the board of directors. So if there is a disagreement with my judgment, you're more than welcome to reach out to Michelle and more than welcome to reach out to the board for further evaluation. Anna asks about, another bit about bills. There will come a time in session where we do have to prioritize what bills we'll be asking for. Because while I would love to be able to ask for 20 things and have all those 20 things show up in the omnibus bills, the final bonding bill, the final supplemental budget bills, etc., that's not a feasible position to take. And all we will do is end up confusing and frustrating legislators because we're making too many requests to them. We will probably have to do some prioritization on what pieces of legislation we focus on most. And that will become the typical way that I evaluate it is what are the legislative priorities that have been set by the board? So I will be looking for bills that are related to democracy, climate change, and racial justice. And I will also be looking for legislation that is feasible for bipartisan support, because we do have a split legislature, and the Senate will have to vote yes on these pieces of legislation to get it in front of the governor. So I will be looking for legislation that has some chance of bipartisan support, either because the policy itself has bipartisan support, or it's non-controversial enough that it will be packaged in with an omnibus bill and not be opposed by one of the chambers of the legislature. So that's kind of another criteria that I've used in the past on when we have to make those prioritization decisions, what I'm looking for. And these are all things that we'll cover more in Lobby Corps and Observer Corps as well. So Anna asks, in regards to today's lunch and learn session, and if you weren't at the lunch and learn session, there was a presentation from ERA Minnesota and Ranked Choice Vote, Fair Vote Minnesota, which Fair Vote advocates for ranked choice voting in Minnesota. What efforts can you make at the state or local league to move the ERA or ranked choice voting issues forward? At the state level, I invite you to observe and lobby on the ERA. We have a really clear position supporting the ERA. Ranked choice voting in Minnesota, we have a position where the board has to evaluate legislation. So the position is actually so specific that it's not just me that makes that determination on whether we're supporting legislation for ranked choice voting. The board itself has to make that determination. It's a very strange position, but that's how it's written. So if we have Lobby Corps members that really want to work on ranked choice voting legislation, we would need to, I would work with you to take that in front of the board for their evaluation. What I can say is we definitely would oppose any ranked choice voting preemption legislation, because our position is very clear that we do want to allow local jurisdictions the option of choosing ranked choice voting if they want it. And so there's some legislation that's been proposed that would prevent that. So Minneapolis couldn't have ranked choice voting anymore. St. Paul couldn't have ranked choice voting anymore. Does Bloomington have ranked choice voting now? There's a couple of suburbs that has ranked choice voting now. And so it would make it so they can't have ranked choice voting anymore. We would oppose that legislation. Our position is very clear on that, at least. So I would be happy to work with folks on that. At the local level for ranked choice voting, if you live in a charter city, you can advocate for your city to adopt ranked choice voting. And so if you're interested in that, I usually encourage folks to work with Fair Vote because they've got a whole campaign set up on that. And I can work with you to explain what policy positions we have at the state league and national league level that would support that action if you so choose to take it. You're not required to support ranked choice voting. There's been at least one or two leagues that have decided that they're not sure it's a good fit for their league and for their local cities, and that's totally fine. That's your prerogative. That's why we have a federated league with the state, national, and local, because some of those decisions should be made at the local level. But if you do live in a charter city, that is one option open to you. Cheryl is mentioning that the ERA, the St. Paul League, has a program at 7 o'clock this week on, is it today? Sounds like today. It's on their Facebook and it's about the ERA. So if you're interested in the ERA, I would encourage you to go to that program at 7 o'clock tonight. It's on their Facebook and it's been linked to in the chat. Thank you, Cheryl. Do you know if the league's recommendation for a new redistricting map was well received? I think we did a great job, but I also helped draw the map and made suggestions. So I have a biased opinion. Like all the maps that were proposed to the court, we received criticisms for one way or another. Some parties thought that we changed too much. Other parties thought that we didn't change enough. Some parties thought that we didn't have enough minority representation in the maps, which was interesting because our minority representation, we had the same number of, we tied for the highest number of minority opportunity Senate districts. We had 21 minority opportunity House districts, the highest being 24. And we were clear, we have nothing against increasing minority opportunity representation. This was just the map that we had created based off of what we felt looked right for local communities. The court will draw something different. I also will caution everyone, there is I would say a 0% chance that the court will outright adopt any party's map. They will look at what they like from each of those maps and what they don't like from each of those maps, and then create their own map. So hopefully we propose some things that they liked, and we'll hopefully see that reflected in the final map that the court eventually adopts, which we will find out in 20 days, 21 days. So, are there any other lingering questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending our January Jumpstart. I think this was one of the first ones. So thank you for doing this and thank you for coming. If you do have any questions that pop up after you leave today's presentation or next week or 3 weeks from now, I'm always available. Please shoot me an email. I tend to respond to email fastest. You're also welcome to leave me a voicemail, but I will, but email is always fastest for me. But I always am happy to help anyone anytime they have a question about anything advocacy related. I had a local league email me earlier this week asking about what their local league can do regarding local action, a local ballot question that might be proposed in their local community, and I helped them walk through some of that. So that's what I'm here for, is to help with anything related to advocacy. I'm here to be a resource to you, so don't be afraid to reach out. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. Again, if you need my email, I'll put it in the chat one more time, nharper@lwvmn.org. And as a reminder, we will be sending out an evaluation form either later today or later this week. So please keep an eye out for that. All right. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time today.